Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Jason and Zach again from RTB Technologies. And today we're going to talk about business email compromise and how scammers can steal millions. We're going to talk about some of the things that we've seen and, most importantly, the impact that we've seen it have on businesses. So, Zach, what are some of the things that you've seen in the wild, and some of the techniques and also
Yeah.
how it's impacted businesses overall?
Yeah. So as we talked about outside of this, this is kind of near and dear to me just because we've really seen it quite a lot. Um, it started off with a Nigerian prince scam, right? More of a phishing type email, but it really is evolved into a business email compromise. And one of the things we've seen a lot is a lot of people have become smart about this, which is great. It's great to hear, right? Because people are becoming more aware. But um, the long time telltales of having a weird gobbledygook email as the actual email with, whatever name is who it's supposed to be, is gone. And they're becoming a lot more sneaky. And what I mean by that is things like, they'll take an address. So for us, RTB Technologies, and they'll change the L to a one because
Right.
most people won't pick that up, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's gotten really sneaky that way, and a lot more open source intelligence is used, like we talked about last week, where you can really find details about a person and then be able to manipulate them, for lack of better terms, into giving you what you want as an attacker.
So in other words, hackers gain access, and really what that means is that they're inside your inbox, right?
Mhm.
So that means that they're looking at all of the emails that come in. Perhaps they'll set up rules, right? Like what are some of the rules that they might set up?
Yeah, so typically what happens after someone gives them access, whether they click on a link or go to a malicious portal and put in their password and stuff like that, or a session stealing, which we'll go into a later date. Typically what they do is they'll put in a rule where everything that you send from that inbox and everything that you receive in that inbox goes to a separate folder that's, sometimes named with a period, sometimes named something innocuous like invoices or anything like that. And part of the rule will be that any email that comes into that box is read. So it doesn't flag or show up to you as the end user being like, oh, why do I have all these unread emails in this box? It's because they set it up so that you don't even notice. And that's the whole point.
Or perhaps they'll set up a rule to look for keywords such as
Yeah.
invoices or payment or
Mhm.
something like that. So those are automatically flagged.
Correct. So what they're really trying to do from these scams is one, gain more access, which hackers are typically looking for, and two, most of the time they're trying to do it for monetary gain. Um, a lot of times when people think about business email compromise, they're talking about getting access to your payment system, whether that's getting your payment people or your payment office to change an invoice or change wiring instructions or where addresses where you send checks to, and then they fraudulently cash those checks and take those wire transfers.
Yeah, that reminds me of something that happened to a nonprofit recently. They were expecting an invoice from one of their contractors. Little did they know that their email was compromised, and they're looking out for that invoice to come in from their contractors, and they saw the email come in, but then all of a sudden it disappeared, and they thought, well, that's weird. But then a short time later, like a couple hours later, it reappeared, and they're like, "Oh, well, it's back." Just
Mhm.
didn't really think anything of it. And once they dug into it a little bit more, what they realized was that the attackers flagged that email and sent it to wherever the hackers were monitoring it, and then they modified that PDF. And so this was a substantial invoice, like over 100
Yeah,
grand.
yeah.
They modified that PDF invoice with a new account number and phone number. And so when that nonprofit got the revised PDF that they were expecting, they wired those funds to an incorrect account number that they thought was legitimate.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately what we see from most of these cases is, again, fraudulent wire instructions, fraudulent addresses and check instructions.
Yeah.
And if you're not paying attention, you can get taken for a whole lot of money. I mean, there was one a couple years ago we heard from another local company for us, not our client, by the way. They lost somewhere around $800,000 from one BEC from one invoice. So, I mean, it can be substantial for most companies.
Yeah.
Um, a way to protect yourself in those cases is to make sure and call the person who sent the invoice, because the best thing you can do is talk to another human being. Generally, humans can tell the difference between an AI speech and a human that they're kind of aware of or familiar with. So that's one way to kind of protect yourself.
Right. But make sure you don't call that number that comes from that particular email or invoice. It's
Correct.
often modified.
Correct.
Another thing that we hear pretty often is that people think they're secure because they're doing business in the cloud. So one of the things that we saw also, again, not our client, but what we saw in the wild was a CPA firm, right?
Mhm.
And they're doing all of their business in the cloud, and the attackers got access to that email, were able to determine which cloud platform they were using, and then just did a simple change password request on that cloud platform. So then they were able to gain access to the CPA's cloud platform, and then went to work filing a whole bunch of fraudulent tax returns. So not only did the IRS flag that as an issue and prevented them from filing more e-file taxes,
Mhm.
but also that CPA company now had to contact over 100 of their clients and say, "Hey, sorry, but there was a fraudulent tax return filed in your name, and
Yep.
unfortunately, it happened on our watch."
Yep.
Imagine being them.
That would be awful, especially because if I remember correctly, this was a couple of years ago, I think. That happened during tax season,
Yes,
right?
February. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I can only imagine the cleanup from that one. That company is probably no longer around, if I'm being dead honest. So
Yeah, it could be devastating. I hope they were able to recover from it.
me too.
But yeah, these things are definitely devastating. What else comes to mind that might be impactful and relevant for the listeners out there?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people know, everyone knows about phishing, and that's really where a lot of this starts, to be on to kind of go down the rabbit hole of what are the kind of steps, right? Because the first thing I would do if I was going to, I'm not going to do this because I've said that I wouldn't. I signed documents saying I wouldn't. But a lot of people, what they would do in hacker methodology is they identify a target. And most of the time, they're not going to go after kind of the lower level employees, the frontline employees, because they don't have access that people are looking for. What they're going to do is they're going to go after your finance officials. They're going to go after your CEO, your C-suite, because a couple things. One, they're easy to get access to from the perspective of information, because most of the time you have a bio, most of the time you have contact information for those individuals. So it's really easy to gain access to them. And two, then they're going to groom the target by doing spear phishing emails, phone calls, trying to gain access to the target, trying to gain name recognition to the target, trying to get trust, right? Third step would be exchanging of information. So sending emails that they know are legitimate, just like, hey, how you doing? How's today going? I have this thing I want to work on, etc. And then eventually down the road, obviously this takes a lot of time, but it's because it's a big payoff. Eventually down the road, they're going to go and send you those instructions or a malicious email to gain access to your system in the background, and then they're going to strike. So,
Right, right. Yeah, and another thing we saw was once the attacker gained access to an email, they got access to all of that person's contacts. And
hmm
then in one instance, there was 1,500 emails sent over a 7-minute period
yep,
to all of this person's contacts. And the title of title of the email was something along the lines of invoice receipt, I think,
hmm
if I remember right. And so the contacts, they see the email come from somebody that they know, and invoice receipt on it, so they're curious, and then they want to click on that PDF,
yep,
which just so happens to contain a malicious link.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are some of the ways that attackers can steal millions from your business, and so stay vigilant out there. Make sure you have multi-factor authentication enabled. That's key. It doesn't prevent everything, but
Nope.
it surely locks more doors, makes it a little more difficult to access.
Yep. The goal is to make yourself as hardened as possible, because everyone's always looking for the easiest fruit to pick, right? Lowest fruit on the tree. So if you make yourself a little bit harder, you're helping yourself. That's all we can go. All we can do.
Definitely. And we'd love to hear the perspective of the listeners out there. If you have any other examples or questions, please let us know.
Mhm.
We'd love to highlight those if you'd like us to, but otherwise it's all about sharing information,
Yep.
making people more aware, because this is definitely a battle of good versus evil, and we're for the good guys here. So thanks for listening, and until next time, have a great day. See you
See
later.
ya.